Death is the unyielding truth that binds us all, an inevitable, profound, and deeply intimate encounter with the finite nature of life. It arrives without warning, shattering the world we thought we knew. In its wake, grief emerges, often dismissed as something to fix or get over. But what if grief, in its suffocating pain, is not a burden to carry or something from which we need to move on? What if grief is instead a sacred invitation, an opening to feel more deeply, to connect in unimaginable ways, and to transform all that we knew to be true? I'm Laura Walton, and I'm so grateful you're here. Together, let's step into the uncharted terrain of death and grief, not as something to fear or avoid, but as a force that shapes us, breaks us, and ultimately remakes us. Let's meet it not with resistance, but with curiosity and courage. And let's do this on purpose. All right, and we're back. Welcome back to Grief on Purpose. We are here today with special guest Rebecca Rau. Rebecca, can you please just introduce yourself?
Yeah, happy to be here. I was connected with Laura. You posted something in an Arizona yoga connections group on Facebook. And being a new person to Arizona, that was one of the groups I had joined to get to know people in the area. And you were seeking people who might want to share their experience through grief and how they've used yoga to support their grief process. And part of my grief experience is pretty fresh. And so in that moment, I was like, yes, because I also believe that we're meant to share our experiences with others because you never know who needs to hear your story and hear your experience. So I am happy to be here and participate.
Yeah, thank you so much for your willingness to be here. I really, most of the time, dislike Facebook, but every once in a while, I get
know.
something good from it,
I know.
some kind of connection. And yeah, being able to reach out in a group like that sometimes could be very helpful and nice to have. I'm curious if you can remember, like when you first saw that post come up in Facebook, asking for what I was asking for, people who were willing to talk about grief and yoga. What was your initial response to that?
I think I immediately wanted to participate because I had I had lost track of my yoga practice a little bit. And then when I started going through this cycle of grief, I knew I had to get back to it, but I was struggling to find my way to it.
Mm.
And so that was one of those things where, as much as I wanted to do it partly to help others, for others to hear that story, but also for myself to help myself get back to that connection.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, I'm glad that you wanted to do it. So you said you're fairly new to Arizona. Where do you come from?
I moved from Washington,
Okay.
not natively though. I'm from Wisconsin,
Right.
but had lived in Washington, Oregon area for about 17 years.
Oh, okay. Got it. And how long have you been in Arizona?
Close to a year. We moved
Yeah.
at the end of May last year. Yeah.
Okay. How's it going for you so far?
It's been good so far. We're heading into now our second summer. And the first summer was okay. We managed. But now that we're more comfortable, we have like more desire to go out and explore. So realizing that the summer kind of limits that, we're figuring it out, making
Yeah.
plans.
Yeah.
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 But we like it.
Yeah. Okay. And would you mind sharing just a little bit about who you are, what it is that you do in your everyday lives?
Yeah, I am a mom to a 3.5-year-old daughter. She is super fun and silly. I also work full time. I'm a business process consultant. So I work for a consultant agency, and that's new for me as well. I just started consulting in December, but I really love it. It's been the thing that's helped me find my flow a little bit. And then in between, I've refound my yoga practice, getting back into that. And I am teacher trained. As much as I would love to be able to treat or teach even like one class a week, life's pretty busy between a toddler and working full time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure it is. Did you ever do any teaching of yoga?
Oh, a little bit. So I started my teacher training a month after I found out I was pregnant. So I was already registered and then I found out I was pregnant. And so after I had my daughter, it wasn't fitting into life. But I did at work, I did some classes just with my work team at my previous employer. So it was fun to be able to step into that. But yeah, I'd like to do more teaching.
Yeah, was that a goal originally when you got into the teacher training, was to teach yoga?
Yeah, I had wanted to do it just as a part-time type situation because, yeah, I already had a full-time job, but
Yeah. Okay. And did you do your teacher training in Washington?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So since you moved to Arizona, I guess my question is, at what point did you lose your connection with your yoga practice? Was it once you moved to Arizona?
No, it was when I had my daughter. So it's been a while. I wasn't getting back to the studio. It was really challenging to find time. In where we were living, we didn't have a overabundance of yoga studios. I had to drive a little bit of a distance, which was just so the inconvenience of that and with having a newborn. And then so I just struggled with finding consistency and going back. And I tried doing practice at home, but there's also the ongoing distractions at home. And so it was really actually being in this cycle of grief that I was like, I have to figure it out. I have to figure it out. And I got to a point. So I guess to share, so my grief that I'm dealing with presently started last year in March. My mom passed away in March. And within a 2-month span, my mom passed away. We moved to Arizona. And 2 days before we had to be out of our house in Washington, I was laid off. And so all of those things happened at the same time. And so it was just very tumultuous and chaotic time. And it was really affecting me spiritually, emotionally, mentally. And so it got to the point where I started being a therapist who specializes in somatic experiencing, which is like direct connection to yoga, right? Like it's all about dropping into your body, moving your presence into your body and feeling into that, the different spaces and things. And that was when I was like, okay, this is making me feel so much more grounded and more peaceful. Like I have to. And so I finally found a studio and a class that I absolutely love. And so that my grief is what essentially drove me back to my yoga practice.
Mhm. Yeah. So in hindsight, now when you look back, are you able to say like specifically what it was that was happening for you within the context of your grief that made you realize you needed to return to your yoga practice?
Yeah. The peak of it started manifesting as almost like aggression. Like I felt this physical need to release something. And so, like, even just arguments with my partner would escalate. I realized like connecting those dots sounds funny, not in a physical way, but like our arguments would escalate in a way, like in a in a way that like just wasn't normal for us. And for me, like my response, like I was just very reactive to things. And I was like, this isn't me. Like, how do I get out of this? And then it got to a point where there was a specific day I got up to do my workout. We have a setup in our gym, and I went out to do my workout, and it was like one of those mornings where I was like, I had to force myself out there, and then like continuously just wanted to stop. Which we've all had those experiences when it's morning, we're tired, whatever. But it was like more than that. It was like I literally wanted to collapse to the ground and just be on the floor. And at the end, I cut my workout short, and I did. I curled up into fetal position on my mat. And I just didn't wanna move, and I was like, "Ugh, you gotta go shower, your daughter's gonna be up soon." Managed to get my shower, and then I was getting my daughter ready. I'm down on the floor getting her dressed and stuff, and she left the room, and when I went to stand up, I just got, like, dizzy and lightheaded. And I was like, "What is happening?" And so I went back down, and I just was, like, in this struggle moment, and I finally managed to, like I got up, and I got out to the hallway, and I'm like, I'm not okay. And I went to my bedroom and I just collapsed to the floor and I think a panic attack. Like I just was sobbing, like my heart was pounding, like I just couldn't control it. It was just coming out. And that was the moment where I was just like, this is all building up. This is built up without me realizing how it was influencing things in my body physically and having that effect. And so that was the moment where I was like, I have to stop. I have to pause life long enough to figure out this because,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. How do you think it got to that place of such buildup?
I think it was just not addressing the grief and the things that were going on in life. The grief of my mom passing, the grief of, I worked at the company I was at for 10 years and maybe unintentionally, but we tend to identify ourselves a bit by what we do for work. And so losing that without notice at the same time that like just so much was happening in life and moving to a new place and everything, I was just trying to get through every day. And so but I don't think I was addressing the things that I needed to about my grief and the chaos that was happening. Because even moving down here and then all the decisions you have to make about putting things away in the house and figuring out your new grocery store and figuring out your environment,
Yeah.
where to do things. It's like I got to decision fatigue. And we were also, my siblings and I had to handle our mom's estate. We didn't have there was nothing to guide us on that. We had to make all those decisions ourselves. And so, yeah, there's just a lot happening at one time that I was not offering time to address.
Yeah. Was it conscious that you weren't giving it time or you weren't paying attention, processing, or did it just seem like it accidentally happened?
Maybe a little bit of both, but I think mostly it was subconscious. Like it was mostly just me, just I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
Probably to some level, right? It's I don't have time for this and you push it aside. And then another thing comes up and you're like, I don't have time for this. I push it aside. Yeah.
Okay. But also fitting all of that into an already busy life, I'm sure,
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
make it easier. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. So how many years ago was it that you started practicing yoga?
I started, my serious practice and consistent practice started back in 2018, I want to say, 18
Okay.
or 19. Yeah.
Okay. And then at what point did you do the teacher training?
My training was in 2021.
Okay. Got it. And what initially led you to start yoga in the first place?
So it was actually a former friend was like, let's do yoga. And I was like, that sounds like a great idea. And so I had found a studio and everything. I'm not going to go into details of what happened with said friend, but essentially that relationship is no longer, it actually affected me. I took it hard. I felt deceived by that person. And so it was an ending of something that felt very real, but then at the end, it came to light that maybe it wasn't what I thought it was or wasn't as real as I had thought. So, as much as honestly that ending of that relationship, it hurt and it was hard to deal with, what I got out of it was yoga and the most peace I'd ever felt in my life. And so, if there's beauty in pain, I don't know, a
Mhm.
situation that created hurt, but also brought something really wonderful.
Yeah. It's always so interesting to me how those things can both be true and both
Yeah.
exist at the same time. Yeah. Okay. Your mom died, you said it was a little over a year ago, right? Okay.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but other than your mom, have you had any significant deaths?
No, I've not that close.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So mom has been the most significant death you've
Yes.
experienced. Yeah. Okay. As much as you're comfortable sharing about her death, about your experience with grief surrounding her death, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. Talk about pain, like beauty and pain.
Mhm.
That's definitely come to light for me in this journey in this last year. My mom struggled with a change in her mental health that started in 2014. And so those 10 years before her death were very bumpy. It was bumpy for our relationship. It did ultimately drive me to separate myself from her in life. So for the 5 years before my mom passed, I hadn't had contact with her. I was actually, and it's one of those things where it's some regrets that you hold in life. I was in the process of preparing myself, readying myself to open that door back up when she did pass. My mom chose to end her life. I don't want to say it was solely like a mental health situation. We don't necessarily know because there's evidence that she was also going through other discomforts in life, physical pain and things like that as well. So her passing was unexpected. And because of the bumpy ride of the 10 years before that, it was almost like grieving those, like there were separate griefs. It's like we finally felt this opportunity to grieve what was the last 10 years, because essentially like that change in her mental health, it almost made it feel like the mom we grew up with was no longer, and this was a different person to some degree. And so it's like when she literally physically passed away, it was like that release of being able to finally grieve what was those 10 years. And then like also though letting that go and just being able to recognize her for the mom that she was, the person who raised us, and that we remember her as, and all that love and all the good things, and being able to also grieve that person. But it was just like it was almost like a double hit when that happened. But yeah, so it's sorry, I'm recollecting myself.
No, it's okay.
So it was hard. And my experience, even in those 10 years with her, was yes, there was mental health change, and that was real. But I also had some really wonderful experiences with her. And she almost seemed to, there was almost like a freedom that I felt from her. And she found yoga at that time too. And so it was something that we connected over. And that's where like this, like part of this, like beauty out of the grief comes from is now whenever I practice yoga, it's like I have that extra connection to her, because it's not just I go to my mat to let go of things and to just feel peace and connect to my body and my heart and things like that. But it's like there are times where I just feel her there with me because that was something that we enjoyed together. And even the studio and the class, the teacher that I go to now is exactly what I think my mom would have loved. I think she would have wanted to participate in that with me. And the teacher I go to now, she does such a wonderful job of she does uses visualizations and things like that. And it's the way that she teaches her class, it's like it helps me to bring my mom's energy just right there with me on the mat sometimes. And that's been really beautiful.
Yeah. What's your mom's name? If you
Peggy.
want to share. Peggy.
Oh,
Okay.
Peggy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Peggy. So when did she start practicing yoga?
I don't know that I can't remember exactly, but it was sometime within those 10 years after her mental health change.
And while you were still in communication with her? Okay. Okay. So that was something you guys, sounds like had talked about and even practiced together.
Yeah, because it was beyond just the asana, beyond just postures and flow. We both really appreciated the philosophies and those studies of yoga as well. She wintered because she was living in Wisconsin. She wintered here in Arizona in 2019. And I came and stayed with her for a little while. And we went to Red Rock State Park because she wanted to visit the vortexes and have that kind of spiritual experience and things like that.
Okay. Okay. I love the yogic philosophies. That's one of my favorite parts of it. Were there any particular teachings or practices of yoga that you and your mom really bonded over or really resonated with you too?
We just liked to explore and have just open discussion over just about anything. Like that was one of the things, even as a teenager, still at home, we used to go for walks all the time. We'd walk for an hour in the evenings and just talk. And so it was that carried on into adulthood. And we talked about lots of things, just in general, like how yoga supports that teaching of like just being a good person and what that means from that perspective. And also we would talk about what do you think happens after death? And in the yogic experience, you think about the path to enlightenment and that your soul is reborn in different forms and that you get to re-experience life from different perspectives so that you can you gain the experiences that you need in order to reach enlightenment in those different forms.
Yeah. Okay. So is that a belief that resonates with you?
It does. Yeah.
Do you know, did your mom resonate with that?
She told me she did. She was also a practicing Christian. Grew up Catholic. To my understanding, though, she separated more from true Catholic teachings, but she still believed in God and had a Christian faith to her beliefs as well. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like that you at least to some degree had a little bit of a conversation with your mom about beliefs surrounding death, which not everybody has that conversation, and not everybody gets to have that gets a chance
Mhm.
at that conversation before somebody dies. So what I'm wondering about with that is because you've had that conversation and now you've experienced her death, what, if anything, having that conversation and having that understanding of her belief system, how that impacts your grief?
I haven't thought about that very deeply, I guess. Like
Okay.
that specific, I come back to it, but I guess in terms of really like how has that impacted my grief, I want to say that it brings me more like comfort and peace in a way, just because it's maybe I feel like it's a deep level of understanding to have of her and how she felt about that. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. We don't always have all the answers. You also talked about in your physical practice, like when you go to a yoga class, it feels like there's a connection with her
Mhm.
in some way. Yeah. Are you able to explain that a bit more, what that actually feels like for you?
Yeah. Sometimes it's just like a feeling like in my chest, your heart chakra area. It's and it feels different at times, like depending on how I'm experiencing my grief. If it's like a sadness where it's like more of this collapsing in feeling here, but then other times it's more like this celebration of who she was as a mother and person, woman in life. But in particular, in a recent class, when we started Shavasana, our teacher took us through this visualization and it was meant to focus us on our heart chakra. And I remember just laying there and I just felt my mom next to me. And we got to the point where she was like trying to take us out of Shavasana and I just had to stay longer because I was like, I literally just felt her there.
Yeah.
And I had in my mind been just a little bit of a conversation or like a passing of message to her, just wanting to feel that love and make sure she feels my love back. And
Yeah.
yeah,
That felt like you were communicating to her or she was communicating to you or both?
a little bit of both. Sometimes just someone's presence feels like communication when you
Yeah.
have that relationship where it's like you don't have to say anything at all, but
Mhm.
there's still communication happening. But also sitting in that moment and wanting to make sure that I like was radiating my love back to her.
Yeah. Is that similar to how your relationship with her maybe at times had been in life, in that you were able to just be with her and not necessarily have to say anything?
Yeah. I feel like we had a pretty good understanding of each other on a deeper level. Sometimes it's hard in life to find people who think through life and like that at that same depth as you. But I felt like my mom and I oftentimes were on that same wavelength. So
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Is it every time or frequently that you go to a yoga class that you feel that connection with her, or is it only at certain times?
I think I'm always, I think every yoga class I think of her. And it varies by class as far as is it so heavy on my mind or my heart today that this class is just all about feeling into that? Or like I said, some days it's a lighter feeling and it's just like more of a celebration of feeling love for her and whatnot. Or sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just I'm having a good day and I'm here just celebrating that I'm having a good day and I'm not weighed down by my grief. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, from the little bit you've shared about her death, it sounds like it was a surprise for you. It
Mhm.
wasn't something you were expecting. How did you find out about her death?
My brother called me. So I have 3 other siblings, and my older brother was the one who was contacted by police, and he called all of us.
individually. Yeah. Do you remember what that moment was like when you found out?
Yeah, it was shock and surprise. We didn't stay on the phone very long because I just was like, I just need to process. And it was morning time, but like maybe mid morning, I think. And so I work remotely from home. So I was at my desk. I was in the middle of working, and I just was like, I just need to stop. I remember I started moving into a panic attack of sorts. I started getting like shortness of breath, lightheaded, shaky hands. But I remember my hands were shaking so bad, but I just had to type a message to my boss and just be like, family emergency, I gotta go.
Mm.
Just so I could step away from that. And then, yeah, I went over and collapsed like by the couch and just was like, my partner had just left to run an errand, I think. And so I called him and was just like, I need you to come home. And so, yeah, and then it's spending time on the floor crying, just trying to like process and then take it in.
Mhm.
Especially knowing that she chose to end her life. That brings a different layer to it.
Yeah. What did her death and the means of her death, what did that mean to you initially in those first hours?
You made me rephrase.
Okay. Yeah, when you got that call from your brother, and then in the immediate, let's just say even hour following when you first knew this news to be true,
Mhm.
how did you even make sense of that? How did you take that in?
I don't know. Your mind just races with lots of questions. And especially when the manner in which she passed away was she fell from a height. And it was like, you started asking, did they get it right? Did she do it on purpose or was it an accident? Like you start running through, like trying to justify, like maybe it wasn't that, maybe it was something else. Or, okay, it was, she did do it on purpose. Like all the feelings and thoughts and questions that come with that. There's just a lot of racing mind and then just like heartache of trying to like fathom just the fact that she doesn't exist anymore physically. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So is your understanding that she did do it on purpose?
Yeah.
Yeah. What does that mean to you?
A good question.
Mm.
It's, I think it's my answer to that has definitely changed over the course of the year. I think I've come to more just respect that she was in a place that she just didn't want to be anymore. And it's hard because since I wasn't having contact with her, I don't know entirely. I can make assumptions around what happened, why, but I guess in the end, I don't have to know. It was her decision. And she believes that's what she needed to do for herself in that moment. And yeah, I don't know, just knowing at least understanding how things might have been for her, like her mental health alone, like she did have paranoid delusions. And I can't even imagine what that's like living with that and living in a different reality from everyone else around you. So just, I guess, being able to empathize to that and just respect that, like, whatever else she had going on in life, that was the choice that she made, and she is at peace now.
Yeah. Was that ever something you had even considered as being a possibility?
As she would take that action.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that some of us have that concern over the course of those 10 years. Yeah.
I had I don't know if you know this or not, but my dad committed suicide when I was 21, but it wasn't surprising to me. It had been talked about before. So when I got that news, there's this weird moment of shock, but not surprise.
Mhm.
Like some part of you has been expecting this, for me at least. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the same. Yeah. Shock, not entirely surprised, but it catches you off guard. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't, whether, no matter whether somebody's sick or die from any other means that we might be expecting in some way, there's still nothing that can really prepare you for getting that
Yeah.
news and having that be truth. Right.
It
Yeah. So over the course of the year-ish since she died, has or how has your understanding kind of where she was at in her life, and what your relationship with her had been like in those last years of her life, has that shifted in any way?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah. Over the last year, has your relationship with her death
Mm.
and wherever you might see yourself in the context of that, has that changed?
Yeah, I think what's changed a lot for me in terms of just how I was feeling and coming out of that, and in terms of my relationship with her too, was there was a lot of immediate like guilt and regret because she wasn't involved in the last 5 years of my life. She did not meet my daughter. She did not meet my partner. She didn't get to meet my family. And I have reasons for that and hope that people understand that and that it came from a place of love for myself and love for my family. It was a decision I had to make in the moment. And I can still acknowledge that, but I also felt a lot of regret and guilt over that. And that weighed on me a lot. I think that I dealt with that for the majority of the last year, because it was really just before we came to the 1 year anniversary this past March. It was the week prior, and all of a sudden I looked at the calendar and realized what day was coming up, and I started sinking into these heavy emotions. And I had a day where I needed to just like lay down. My partner just laid with me and comforted me, and I just cried and was trying to like just sort through the things in my mind. And that grief and regret was coming up for me again. But I realized that if the situation between me and my mom was between me and my daughter, and she took the actions and did the things as far as separating herself from me for the same reasons I did, that I would forgive her. And I would always forgive my daughter. And it made me realize that my mom would always forgive me as well. And that just brought me a lot of peace and comfort. I still feel the regret and the guilt to some extent, but it makes it easier to move forward and move past it, to understand that my mom still loves me and she forgives that happened, and she understands why I would have made that decision.
Yeah. And you felt that sense?
Yeah.
Like in looking at your daughter and your relationship with her, you were able to feel in some form that same, I don't know, bond, connection, whatever you want to call it, with your mom?
Yes, I feel connected to my mom a lot through my daughter all the time.
Yeah.
My mom, I grew up on a dairy farm, so my mom worked on the farm. She also parented 4 children, and that was a lot. That was a big workload. Like, I work full time and I raise one kid. I can't imagine doing that with four, let alone the fact that farm work is different than sitting at a
Yeah.
desk doing computer work. And so I we all carry stuff from our childhood that we maybe wish our parents would have done different or whatever. And I always carried with me a little bit like, I wish that I had more time with my parents. All of us kids worked on the farm. We all worked on the farm. And I missed having more of that, just like one-on-one, like bonding time. And for a little while, that might have come through me as like a resentment in a way. But I've really come to know that, or understand that, my mom did that was my parents' way of life. And so my mom did what she had to do, and she raised us the way she could, mixed with that, but that didn't change how she felt about us. And that I feel like I have this opportunity to parent my child in the way that I know my mom wished she could have, had she had more time available to do that. And that's probably true for a lot of moms who work, but it just creates this connection though for me of, I'm going to parent and love you and smother you in the way that I know that like my mom would have done for me. And I feel like it makes me cherish the time with my daughter even more, because it feels like I get to live into that in a way that maybe my mom didn't get to, because of her lifestyle and what that was. And so, like, I feel like that's my way of honoring her in a way, is through the way I parent and spend time and love my child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. There's something really
Yeah.
beautiful in that.
Yeah. Even so on the day, like preparing for like the 1 year anniversary, I'm like, grief is sneaky. It comes up out of nowhere. And that had happened over the course of the last year. And I'd been feeling pretty good. And then all of a sudden, like realizing that day was coming, I started to, I'm like, what's going to happen? What if I shut down again when that day comes? And so I started planning, like, what are the things that I'd want to do? And I had this whole idea of I'm going to go to yoga and I'm going to do these things and I'm going to do some meditation and whatnot. And I woke up that day and I was like, all I want to do is mom stuff. I just want to do some things to like take care of my kid. That was my way of wanting to remember my mom, was to be a mom. So I did some things. I had to clean out my daughter's closet because the heat's coming and she needed another size bigger. And so I took care of things like that. And then I picked her up from daycare early and we baked cookies, my mom's chocolate chip recipe. We baked cookies together and I just spent time with her. That was the way that I wanted to honor my mom's memory this year.
A couple thoughts I have on that. One, it sounds like that wasn't what you were planning. That is just what showed up the day of. And you were aware of that enough and willing to change plans enough to go with that. And then two, it just makes me think of the Lion King, the Circle of Life song. Like that song's going through my head. You're like recreating that circle in a different way, which is, I think is really cool. Yeah. I do have a curiosity about something. If it's not something you want to talk about, that's fine. But I noticed that the terminology that you use, I think you said that she chose to end her life. Is the right words that I use or that you said? Yeah. Is that if some other random person was asking you about how your mom died, is that what you would say? Are those the words you would use? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just curious how you came to those words and that being the way that you explain it.
That's a good question. I feel like for me, saying my mom committed suicide, using the word like committed makes it sound like it's like this atrocious thing she just did. You commit a crime, usually we use that in a term of you did something bad.
Yeah.
And I know plenty of people do believe that they might have that belief around suicide or choosing to end your life. I guess for me, I don't have that view of it. I don't think of it as like a sin or a whatever. It was a choice she made. And I think through like that, like just respecting that was her choice. And I don't have control over those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that a phrase that kind of immediately somehow you found it, or did it take you some time to find the phrase that was right for you?
No, that's how it came out.
Okay.
Yeah. I even remember the first friend I really reached out and was like to connect with over this. Because initially I'll just tell people like my mom died or my mom passed. And if they ask what happened, I would say that she chose to end her life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and I'm certainly not saying like there's a right or a wrong way to talk about it because I don't think there is. I think what's the right way is the way that feels right to us, and sometimes we need to figure that out. Like sometimes we might not always be there. Sometimes we have to sit with actually what feels true. That's what you're saying is you figured out what felt true to you, and that's what works for you, and that's perfect. So back to your yoga practice here, is there a particular, first of all, how familiar are you with the 8 limbs of yoga?
So I will say I am terrible at being able to just like regurgitate information. So if you asked me to name them, I probably could not.
I'm not going to ask you to name them.
But if we had a conversation about the content, like what they are and how they fit into life, yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. You don't need to go down a list of them, but what I'm more interested in if there's a particular practice within the broader yoga practice that feels like it's been the most helpful to you in navigating your grief.
Yeah, a lot of things. The class that I started attending, and if I'm allowed to give a shout out, I go to Gilbert Yoga.
Yeah.
And it's the 6 a.m. sunrise class on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And the teacher is fantastic. And she incorporates, we do asana, and it's like movement that I absolutely love. Like it always feels good in my body. But she also incorporates like breath work, like a variety of breath work and like the Bondi, like containing energy containment and visualization. And sometimes we do chanting. And so it's this very holistic experience in that regard. And sometimes it's even like focusing on candles and light the fire. And it's just, she incorporates so much that just feels so wonderful in the end. And but even before that, back when I first started my practice, there was an instructor or teacher there who had more of a bhakti practice. And so she also incorporated more chanting and that more spiritual incorporation into the asana practice. So having that, I think that one, chanting always feels good, that the vibration through the body it just feels wonderful. And it feels very cleansing, I would say. But also like just having that spiritual conversation on those topics, like the topics of the teachings of yoga and how you bring that into your life. And because that same teacher who taught bhakti, she would do workshops where we would have conversation over certain topics. And when I moved here to Arizona, that was something that I like was craving. I was like, I need some more, like, I need to find people I can discuss this with. And I don't even remember how. It was on Facebook. I'm with you. I try to avoid Facebook, but groups are actually helpful sometimes. And I somehow stumbled on another studio here. They're a studio in Queen Creek, but they were doing a book study or a book club, and they were doing it in person and virtual, which meant I could participate because Queen Creek's a little bit of a drive for me. And so I was so happy. And they were reading the book when I joined was the Upanishads. And we took time to read through that and have really meaningful discussions with each other. And I just needed that back in my life, like having that like deep conversation about life and the teachings of yoga.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's something about the deep spiritual study of it that's really grounding to you. That
Yeah.
is something that when you get lost, that's something that really
Yes.
pulls you back that you need.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So do you have a like ideal kind of regular practice these days?
Yeah. I've settled I go to the studio once a week for our morning. That's that class that I just described where it brings such a combination of practice that it just makes me feel so complete. And it's a place I love that I can go to my mat when I'm having a hard day, but I can go to my mat when I'm having a joyful day. And like you just live into whatever that is. And if it's hard weighing down stress, you can let it go. And if it's joy, you can celebrate it. And so going once a week has been what worked for me. And then the book club, I would like to continue doing. I would like to find something that's a little more regular with that. And so I've actually thought about talking with maybe some folks at the studio I go to regularly and see if we can maybe set something up there. I like having those people around me. I can read it at home, but I like one, having the accountability and also having the people to discuss it with.
Yeah. Yeah. Helpful. Yeah. So we've talked a lot about yoga, but has there been anything else that you've found to be specifically really helpful for you in navigating your grief?
I relate most of it back to yoga, but I think it's just like the way that I've integrated some of the teachings into my life and how I carry myself through life. But a lot of it too is like setting boundaries and just being okay with that and being clear about it and being a little bit vulnerable. I started a new job in December. And so at my previous job, like I'd worked with those people for 10 years, I felt comfortable sharing a lot with them. And now I'm at a new company and then you still start trying to find your way in there. But there were days where, because I wasn't yet dealing with my grief in a really helpful way when I started that job. And so there were days where I had to message my boss and say, I'm taking a grief day. And I had already known enough about that person to at least feel comfortable saying that and knowing that they wouldn't question it or whatever, they would respect it. But I was like, I'm having a day where it's like, I'm literally just staring at my screen and I can't do anything or focus because I'm so deep in my grief and I have chaos in my mind. So yeah, so creating those boundaries and knowing understanding your limits of at what point do you need to like deal with these feelings and emotion and not just shove them away or stuff them down.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure every day can be a little bit different, but would you say that overall these days you are in a place where you're navigating your grief in a way that you feel good about?
Yeah, because with that too is just whether it's yoga or something else, like always creating some quiet time or just space for myself to be with my thoughts and feel into my body. Because I realize that a lot of times, like I might feel it physically before I realize it's like actually a problem. And so creating that quiet time, and my partner's been along with me on this journey. And so he's also learned some of the signs of maybe you need to go take some time to yourself. I'm seeing a pattern here. So yeah, definitely creating that time for quiet.
Yeah, it's important. Is there anything that you've come across that you found to be one of the least helpful things with your grief?
Just in general, like doing too much and pushing too far. Yeah. But that's where it's like it's this balance of realizing you need to create pause in your day. Because if you don't pause, you don't realize you're taking on too much and you don't realize how it's stacking up.
Yeah, I agree with that 1,000%. That pause is so important. So maybe just two more questions here. If there were somebody who was brand new to their grief and the death just happened, is there anything you would say to them?
I would tell them to give yourself that space every day, to lean into whatever it is you're feeling. And I know that for some people, it just feels so uncomfortable that they just don't want to face it. But the reality is the only way you're going to get through it is to go through it. So you have to create that space and learn to just feel into whatever you're feeling and let it be. And so however you want to create that space, whether you take up a yoga practice or not. But I would say that, and then just giving yourself grace, like don't feel bad if you have to go spend a day in bed because you're weighed down by your grief. Like it's a significant thing to go through in life, like very significant, not to be taken lightly. And I think it's something to be respected. I hope that everyone has those people in life who respect what they're going through and help support them through that. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Those are good. Thank you. Is there anything yet that feels unsaid in this conversation? I'm sure we could talk for days, but anything about grief, about yoga, or something that's somehow related to that you still feel is important to say?
Mm. No, I feel like we touched on a lot. And I think that especially that just previous question really, I think, wrapped it up. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time out, talking about something that most of us don't ever like to talk about, and being so vulnerable. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah. Happy to do it.
Thank you for being here with me, Laura Walton, and my incredible guest on Grief on Purpose. Your presence is a gift, and I'm so grateful you're walking this path with us. For more connection and resources, you'll find everything you need in the show description. To my guests, thank you for sharing your person with us today. It is truly an honor to know your story. I'm your host, Laura Walton. Until next time, be kind to yourself and remember you're not alone in your grief. We are here on purpose.